Episode 24 of the Bmoney Beastin podcast. I am here with Coach Nicholas Coco. I'll never do that the right direction. All right, there we go. Dude, this is round two for us. People don't know that we had about a 35-minute conversation that was really good. And for whatever reason, midway through, it just stopped recording. So we're going to start over here. You are from the state of New York.
Yes, born and raised.
Let's start with New York. Let's start with how you again, so we can actually share it this time for people to see it. Let's go back to how you got implemented into the sport of wrestling and how it led to where you are now. You're putting out some really cool stuff on social media and you're sharing a really cool message. So where did that originate?
Yeah, definitely. Going back to the beginning, right? So we talked about this the last time we connected, but something a lot of wrestlers can relate to, especially up here. And maybe if they're thinking about getting started, I didn't start wrestling until later. I'd say middle school age. So it wasn't even in 8th grade. I missed the tryout period in 8th grade to do modified. We call modified as middle school up here.
Okay. Modified.
Okay. Wrestling until on the varsity team in 9th grade. So I kind of got through into the fire. I was about a 35 pounder. I did have combat sports experience. When I was 5'6", I started boxing. And then as time went on, MMA surged in popularity. So I started a little bit of jiu-jitsu, a little bit of MMA. And so I was always active in the combat martial arts and the combat arts. But nothing can compare to being on a wrestling team, being part of a wrestling program. So it was really my brother, whose birthday it actually is today. Shout out to him.
Happy birthday.
He had already been done with school at the time. He was done with high school, obviously middle school. And he's like, listen, if I could go back and I was in your shoes, I would wrestle. And you got to remember, this is 20 years ago. So close to it at least. And I'm like, okay, why? He's like, well, you can't really learn this outside of it. Obviously, fast forward to 2024, we have great things going on down by you in Georgia, out on the West Coast. My guys at the SoCal Wrestling Club, they're trying to build adult wrestling. But you got to think of the context of the time. If you didn't do it in elementary, middle, or high, you're not doing it. You're not learning. This is the reality. So he influences me. He's my brother. I'm like, all right, let's do this. Let me try this out. And once I started, I couldn't stop. And it was just like a steamroll. It was just I was on it. So that was a little bit of my backstory, that I didn't start late. And I did end up wrestling in college, and obviously being a college coach and having a very successful career in wrestling. So really, and I know guys who even start later become state champs, national champs. So I do believe there is power in starting early, of course. But that's maybe something you and I can get into, Jesse.
Yeah, I wanna touch on what you just said, dude. I've seen both sides, right? I'm gonna give you a crazy example. There's a couple of examples I can give you that are both mind blowing. One, I don't know if you've seen an episode I did maybe 2 or 3 weeks back with Michael Keefe.
Michael
Keefe, Keefe. Keefe. He's from the same town I'm from. Mm-hmm. He's a twin. Him and his brother Josh, they started wrestling in 9th grade. They got plucked out of the cafeteria. They were fighting or something in the cafeteria, and the wrestling coach is like,
great candidates. Those are the best.
Yeah, you come with me. You want to wrestle, right? Less than 6 years later, he placed 5th at the NCAA's Division I, and that to me should be a freaking movie, dude. That'll probably never happen again. That's insane. But he talked about his work ethic. Him and his brother, he had a built-in practice partner, same size and everything, right? Your twin brother. They used to break into the wrestling facilities and train at 11 o'clock at night. So they were obsessed with it. So I guess there is something to be said for, if you do start late, you're excited at the right time, right? So then you got kids, and I can even talk about Bryson right now. He's going through some stuff, but he started at 5, 6 years old. And as times went on, he loves it, right? But it's more of a challenge now. It's not as excitable as it was even 3 or 4 years ago, right? it's like, okay, this is what I do versus, hey, and it goes kid to kid too, right? Like some kids, like it's just all the way through. Some kids, it's, I hate it in the beginning, I love it later. It varies person to person, personality. But the second thing I want to say, the second example, dude, like there was a kid at Dalton, which is down in North Georgia. The kid, he literally was a basketball player. Mm-hmm. And he practiced for like 9 days or something. And there's a tournament here, the Macaulay tournament, which is like at a private school in Chattanooga. And he went up there. He either won it or got second in like 9 days. Like, so like,
that's unbelievable.
There is exceptions to the rule of, you have to do this your whole life to be great, yada, yada, yada. Do I still believe that you need to start at a young, especially like you can pick up football pretty easy, blocking and tackling if you got some athletic ability. I think there's like a handful of sports you really have to do from a young age. Like wrestling's one of them. Baseball, I feel like, is one of them. Like learning to pitch and be accurate and, hand-eye coordination, I think there's a lot to that. Golf maybe is probably one of them, right? Like there's certain sports that I feel like you can't just do, right? Like anybody, me, you, the kid down the street, the old lady over here, we can all play football, right? You don't have to be special to play football. I can teach a monkey how to block and tackle in 10 seconds, right? So there's certain things you can just kind of pick up, and there's certain things I feel like you got to like build skill with. And wrestling's definitely one of them because it's something you'll never master either, right? Like me and was it Vantage? I was talking to Bailey at Vantage. It might have been me and him talking. One of these episodes, I was talking to somebody, and we were talking about how it's like a continual chase, right? And I think in terms of development as a human being and not just as an athlete, I feel like that's something that everybody needs, right? Like right now, we're on episode 23 of this podcast. Mm-hmm. If you'd asked me on the first episode that me and Bryson did, are you going to make it to episode 23? I highly doubt it, dude. Like, I don't know. But I'm not perfect at it. I make mistakes. Like introductions are a little off sometimes. Like we're human.
Of course.
So I'm chasing getting better at the podcast. Like each episode, I want it to be better than the last. Now, does that mean I'll ever be perfect? Absolutely not. Joe Rogan's not perfect. So it's the same thing in wrestling, right? You might have like, we'll use one of the Botman kids, right? Freddie Botman, he's from PA. That kid won like his 9th Super 32 title this past week, right? 9 times, dude. That is phenomenal, right? All right. And, he's going to end up at a Division I school somewhere. Does that mean he's going to go undefeated for 4 years in college? Probably not. Like, it's just what it is. Jordan Burroughs, he's probably, the GOAT of our sport. He's been beat, right? So it's always the chase, right? So I think in developing human beings, like I said in previous podcasts and conversations, put a kid in a wrestling club. Let them wrestle like 3 or 4 months every year. If they play other sports, great. Just let them learn how to, work towards something and develop goals and things like that and be disciplined. And, that goes back to the young age thing too. And now that you asked me my opinion on all this, if I could go back in time as a crazy wrestling dad at one point, right? If I could go back in time and do things different, and if I ever have a grandson that wrestles, I think I will push my son to, hey, let's do it this way. You remember what you were feeling at this time in these places? I think until like age, I don't know, 12-ish, 13, when you're talking about kids that are like 4, you got parents out there with kids wrestling at 4 years old now, right? At 4 years old, the thought process and the mental capabilities of like, honing in on anything other than I like SpongeBob and I want to eat a peanut butter sandwich later. Like, that they don't have this great attention span. So like, that's why you see like 4 or 5, top matches. And usually what they do is they learn a snap down and a cow catcher. And that's about all they know for like a year or so. And that's okay, right? They're being exposed to it. Now, up until 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you got to kind of figure out your kid too. Every kid's a little different. Some kids are like hungry and want it, and some kids are like, all right, I need a break now. So realistically, I don't think the year-long grind of folk style, freestyle, then the summer camps, and then you're back in. And say you play football, now you're in football, and you play football for 3 months or whatever. Now you're back wrestling, and then it just circles and circles and circles. Looking back at it, if I could do it different, I think I would have I would have had break pockets through the year. Like I've always kind of pushed to all right, we go from here to here, here to here. But I'm very structured in my life in general, right? Like I pay my bills a week ahead. Like I'm just that guy, right? So I've always tried to push that on my son, who's a different person than me. He looks at things different than me, and I'm starting to understand that as he gets older, right? But realistically, I think when they get maybe 12, 11, 12, this is my opinion, right? Everybody's got one. Maybe, say they go through folk style, give them 2 weeks off, right? 3 weeks off, a month, whatever they may need to reset to be hungry to do folk style, freestyle, right? And then the same thing going into the summer, kids also need to have that balance to be kids. But so starting late may not also be a bad idea either. Now, wrestling's different than football, but the Mannings didn't start playing football until they were in 7th grade, right? They're both of them will probably end up in the Hall of Fame. I know Peyton's already there. So it just varies, I feel like, on personality. Does that make sense? I think do you have a kid that really wants this right now, or do you have a kid that he likes it, but he's got other things he's interested in? It's kind of a balance, but I still feel like they need reset times, and your body can only take so much too, right? Like we've dealt with a lot of injuries because we really had never stopped, right? So it's just a delicate balance, and everybody's a little different.
Yeah, definitely. I hear where you're coming from. I totally understand it. Hindsight is always 20/20, right?
Dude, it is, man. Yeah.
So I think the one thing that you're talking about, individual factors with your own son, personality plays a part. I think as kids advance through the coaching, and I've coached youth, you reminded me of youth. I mean, youth practice was maybe 1 or 2 times a week. The majority of the time is going to be games, and we're going to teach them we're going to teach them skills disguised as games, or games disguised as skills, however you want to put it. So we're painting it, we're dressing it up but by doing the game, they're going to actually learn this fundamental movement pattern, this wrestling skill, and they're associating wrestling with fun, joy, expression. So they're becoming better wrestlers, and they're having fun in the process. Okay, great. This is for 5 or 6 year olds. Now we can fast forward a little bit. Yeah, I didn't really start competing in combat sports until that 12, 13 mark. So I think prior to that, you're just establishing the lessons and the principles, because of my philosophy of Coach Coco Wrestling is building champions on the mat and in life. So it's taking the holistic approach, mind, body, spirit. We're not separating just the weight room. We're not separating just the mental training. We're not separating the doubles and singles. I'm trying to blend it all together holistically and giving the individual athletes and the teams an actual training program and how to, utilize this in a systematic format. But let me flash back real quick. So I should add an asterisk, a caveat. When I was in high school, I was wrestling 40 to 50 matches in the off season. So I was making up for the lost time, and I did learn how to compete on a mat. So I did have hundreds of wrestling matches in a shorter window. That would typically be from your son or the 5 to 6 year old, because I got connected with the right club coaches, with the right mentors who are like, if you want to do this, you got to make up for lost time. And that was the way it was back then. So
in that scenario, though, you wanted to do that, right?
Yes, I never had I don't come from wrestling parents, wrestling family, old school. You go to work, you make money,
right.
There's no so I basically led the charge on that. I'm the first person who, when I have a child and I have a family, I'm going to be that would be the next step, how you guys are.
Dude, because most kids are I won't say names or anything, but I know several kids over the years and if you get them sometimes away from their parents and you're just talking to them,
oh yeah,
they're going to be like, dude, I don't want to do this right now, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I've been guilty of that too. That's the thing. I'm very transparent, right? I love Bryson more than life itself. That's my guy. I always will. That's my boy. With that being said, at times I've probably pushed him harder than he probably wanted. And And at times it was even in a selfish way. Like I think sometimes like my whole goal for him was just to have a good life and stay on like a good path. And then, of course, you know, like as me personally, like if we play dominoes, I'm going to be competitive over dominoes, dude. Like I've always kind of been that way. I remember when I was a kid, you ever played, do you ever watch pro wrestling as a kid?
Absolutely.
All right. WWF. Yeah. Back in the day, WWF. I was going to say that. My cousin had a PlayStation 1, right? And that's like when they first come out, like the coolest thing in the world. You know, we played like Spyro and all that. But he had WWF Warzone, and it had Stone Cold Steve Austin on the front. And how that game worked, it was like a bunch of TVs, like almost like Mortal Kombat, and like you beat one to get to the other, the other, the other.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was going screen to screen to screen on these TVs. We played that game for like 9 hours. I'm like 8, right? And we were going back and forth, and we get to like the end. And at the end, you wrestle Steve Austin at the top, and I'm like, dude, I got to know what happens when we win. Like I was like 8 years old. Like this is the biggest moment of my life. And dude, it was so bad because my cousin, it was his turn and he lost. And dude, I didn't find out what happened in that until YouTube came around.
No way.
I lost it. I was so upset because I was so competitive, right? And I've always kind of been that way. And I kind of pushed that off on my son, maybe more than I should have. I'm like, dude, you know, we got to go. We got to do this. We got to. And, you know, looking back on it, I think like when he was young, I think he should have kept playing baseball and done other things. And, you know, in your case, it's really cool because you were later in life and you were a little older and more mature. And I think that translates well because you were making that choice. Somebody wasn't setting this up for you. You were like, this is what I want to do. And I feel like anything you do in life, if you want to be there, like everybody has those days where like, I'm just not feeling it today, right? But when you turn something that's supposed to be an enjoyable experience, even though it's hard, right? It's meant to be hard, but into something that feels like a job, it's not fun anymore. So you kind of need that balance. And maybe by doing that at an older age, you know, where you're more mature and like mentally able to process things a lot better, that's probably why you improved in such a quick rate, if that makes sense. Because like Bryson told me a story once. He said, dude, you sent me to a camp one time and I literally went through the motions for 8 days. He said, I did not want to be there. So in that case, all I did was spend like $500 and he was just not here for a week, right? Like, so you look at it in your situation, maybe that's a good thing. And you're not the first person that's told me that. Like I interviewed another guy, Maloney.
I'm still doing it.
Yeah. Go. You cut out.
No, I said there's a lot of guys who I came up wrestling with who are no longer in the sport as a coach or as an athlete. They don't do anything combat sport related. They don't want anything to do with it.
Right.
So, yeah, grateful and blessed to still be involved in the sport, being able to help athletes. So I think, again, it goes back to that wrestling's a tool, just like our phone's a tool or a hammer. I pick it up to put something in the wall. Wrestling is just a tool. It's just a vehicle to get us to A to B. And, you know, we can look into the percentages later and the numbers that the NCAA provides us on the actual likelihood of the 250,000 high school participants to be in D1, D2, D3, JUCO, or NAIA. We're looking at 1.6%, 1.8% in some cases, 1.3%. So the odds of that child actually even competing in the collegiate scene is relatively low. I think, it was definitely different in my circumstance. But I think like what I do is help wrestlers go from the I have to the I get to, and cultivate an attitude of gratitude so we can approach practice and tournament like Christmas. Listen, I'm a big Christmas guy. Home Alone's my favorite movie. It shouldn't be butterflies and fear. If it is, that's okay. But what I do is help the wrestler be able to reframe and redevelop their thought process on even competitions alone, so they learn to be excited. Because again, what is the grind? The grind from Monday to Friday is to compete on Saturday, at least in the collegiate setting. High school's a little, you got to dual meet here, you got to dual meet here, there. But we should be like, I tell guys all the time, like all the work you put in, all the drilling, all the sprints, all the reps is to wrestle. And now you have a chance to. So let's take advantage of this opportunity. Let's go out there and get our hand raised. Let's go out there and wrestle hard and focus on scoring points. And I know a lot of I'm saying there, but I think it's the I get to I have to I get to, and coming up with gratitude. And we should teach kids that early.
And I agree with that, man. Like, you know, like it goes back, like earlier I was saying, you know, I had another interview and you're talking about 7th grade. Maloney, Chris Maloney, I had a conversation with him, really good guy. And he was telling me that, you know, he didn't start till 7th grade. His dad was kind of around it. I think he was a coach, maybe not. Don't quote me on that. But he was kind of telling me it was late, kind of like you did. Dude, he beat Vito at Super 32 in high school. Like, you can't tell me even now that there's not kids in the country that are 6th, 7th, 8th graders that are just amazing athletes that can't catch up, right? It's very possible. So if anybody that sees this, like that even debates on wrestling, understand in the beginning it's going to be extremely difficult and frustrating because you're going to wrestle guys that's been doing this their whole life. That's hard, right? But it doesn't mean you can't catch up. So, and I'm with you on that, man. Like, when you have, it goes back to what I said about it being a job, right? If you can make it, you know, and there's some kids that, you know, they just thrive on it, right? And there's moments in time where just any kid that like I was mentioning kids, they love it, right? Like they are people. Everybody that does this is a wrestler. They love the sport. But it's like anything. If you eat pizza every day, you're going to get sick of eating pizza, right? So I think, like you said, like I think a delicate balance, like around that, especially like you said, you're still involved in the sport where a lot of guys that grew up doing this year round are like, I don't want nothing to do with this. I want to go drink beer and cook steak or whatever they're doing, right? Like, I'm done with this. So.
We can still. Yeah. No, Chris is an awesome coach. He was an awesome wrestler. I have conversations with him all the time. I know a lot of the New York wrestlers, coaches. The community is pretty small up here. He's doing a phenomenal job. Any kid that has a chance to work with him, they're very lucky, and he's great. So great technician, great tactician, and there's a lot of great coaches up here. So that's a good story. I think it's very important. One, that like rankings and records don't really mean much, and that you should wrestle the man in front of you and not their name or what they look like.
Right.
And this is all mental training. This is what I help a lot of athletes with one-to-one and with teams, is like how to overcome these thoughts and how to like tackle these things head on so they don't have these challenges. And so we can just focus on, you know, scoring points and pinning. That's the goal of wrestling, right? Scoring points and pinning. So it's something I'm really into. I'm very passionate about. I think that with the middle school guys, yeah, kids should play multiple sports year round. They shouldn't be specializing early. Like, I've done research on this. I wrote my master's on this, my dissertation, literally to graduate with a master's degree on over specialization in youth sports, how it leads to overuse injuries, and you're not developing the whole athlete, right? So they're going to get overuse injuries. A kid needs to know how to throw and catch. Kid needs to know how to kick unilaterally, how to jump bilaterally. I mean, I'm getting into the weeds here, but there are certain movements and things that an athlete and a child needs to develop in order to be a full functioning adult, not just in wrestling, but in life.
Yeah, dude. Christian McCaffrey said that. You know, he's the running back out in I think he's in San Francisco now, right? He played for the Panthers. Dude, he said that. He said, man, my whole life, I went from football, basketball, baseball, football, basketball, baseball. He said, I was always in season. He said, he goes, I never actually specialized in anything until I was in college. I went to college to play football.
I saw that.
So like that dynamic, and I can see that, right? Because you take different things from different sports, right? Like, you know, and I can see that being a good development tool. You know, in our case, you know, I played football basically my whole life. You know, when I was young, I played. Dude, it was actually kind of funny. My neighbor, my neighbor down the street, we used to like go outside and you know what kids do when they're in the 90s when they're like 8, right? They got like toy guns and you run up through the weeds and you act like you're in World War II or whatever. What is it?
I said we had cap guns.
Cap guns. Yeah, that's what it was, dude. I was trying to think that. Yeah.
And going back to the PlayStation, I remember our first one. It was Christmas of '96. We got the PS1,
Okay.
and we had.
Yeah, it's about that year. That makes sense.
That's funny that you go throw it back real quick for these kids don't even know what a PlayStation 1 looks like or how they.
I'm gonna hold me to this. I'm gonna post a picture of one on Instagram.
Dude,
my neighbor kid come down, man. He goes, hey man, hey, you know how 8-year-old kids are. We're like retarded, you know. And he goes, hey man. He goes, I'm gonna go play football. You want to go play football? I was like, yeah, sure, dude. So then I went to this old field. I'll never forget it as long as I live. This old man had a big chew in his mouth. All right. Like he had like 3 teeth in his head. And he's sitting by this old like concession stand. And it looked like something out of a horror movie, like The Hills Have Eyes or something. And he goes, and I said, hey man, I'm here to play football. And he goes, you ain't gonna make it. That's what this guy told me, right? And the first day, do what?
They told you straight up, hey, son, you ain't gonna make it.
You ain't got it, kid. Well, he puts me at running back the first day, and he could tell I was a little timid. You know, I'm a little skinny 8-year-old kid. He hands me the ball. The whole offense turns around and the whole defense, and they all hit me. He said, all right, you've been hit. You better now. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I ended up being all right by the end of the season, right? The same kid a few months later, it was starting to be springtime. He goes, hey, man, you want to go play baseball? We're playing baseball. So, like, that's kind of how it was, like, in the 90s. Now, like, kids are, you know, they can turn any corner and they got an opportunity to play a sport, right? And, like, with Bryson, he did everything up until – he even ran, like, cross-country for the school and did, like, a track thing. And, you know, so I can see that being very valuable.
Yeah, obviously times have changed. Like, there is – I should put an asterisk, a caveat. Like, there is a time where the athlete must focus on 1 or 2 things, in my opinion. There is a time, but it's not at 6 years old.
Not at all.
So that there is, I'll put an asterisk. I'll put a caveat. Yes, there is a time for focus, but it's not too soon. Definitely in elementary school. Maybe 7th grade might be the time for some kids. Maybe 8th, maybe even 9th. But there will be a time where they have to lock in on 1 or 2 choices. And it should be the one where they have the most opportunity to not only succeed in that sport, but help them possibly get into higher education, get an opportunity.
Right,
so, like,
right.
playing tennis and basketball, but you're a way better tennis player. Stick with tennis, kid. You're going to the Ivies. Let's keep listeners. Like, of course, as a parent and a family, you have to make that decision. And obviously, it's a wrestling podcast, but the lesson and the premise is still the same.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you feel me on that? And I think a big thing we talked about earlier is like physical maturity. Like, middle school wrestling is bogus because it's maturation, and every boy goes through puberty at a different time. Like, this is basic A&P in school, like physiology. So a kid might have muscles in 8th grade and a beard, and in 7th grade, he hasn't even gone through a growth spurt. So that impacts the level of strength and how good a kid is being, for example, a hammer with legs or on top. So a kid might be great in 8th grade, but by the time he gets to 11th grade, everybody caught up. He's no longer the strong kid. You see this a lot as a high school coach. I've been there. A kid you think is going to blossom into a national champ, Fargo guy, but he just hit the spurt earlier than the rest of the pack.
And, you know, with that, dude, there's something that kills me with that is it's not just middle school. It's where, you know, we were at a duel like a month or 2 ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And you had 16-year-old kids. The holdback deal is ridiculous, right? You had 16-year-old kids that were quote unquote 8th graders, right? Mm-hmm. That, you know, doing the homeschool, whatever situation. And I thought to myself, I'm like, we were there on a high school team and he hadn't even started 9th grade yet, right? To me, you're going to pull a junior, senior. You're going to get your ass kicked at some point this weekend, right? That's the whole point.
Right.
If you're 16, if you're 16 years old and you're wrestling potentially 6th graders, like to me, that's just like, okay, I went 9-0 this weekend. You did. You got armpit hair, and these kids just quit watching Pokemon. So, like, I don't see how that's in any way, like, it doesn't help the kid that's held back. and it doesn't help the kid that's wrestling his age group. It's really counterproductive. And I know that certain states, I don't know what New York is. I know down in Georgia, you can't be 19, I think, before your season starts. I think that's how it goes. So like these kids that hold back, most of the holdback kids end up at these private schools, and they're like 20-year-old seniors. And it's like, I don't get it, right? I don't get it. Like, I'll never get it. And on a social level, if you're going into high school, all right, and you've been held back once or twice or whatever, and you go into high school as a 16-year-old freshman, all right, I'm driving in, and then you see, like, say you're a boy, you drive to school, you walk in, most freshman girls have braces, right? They look like kids, right? You don't even fit in your class, right? Like, so now you're older than everybody. On a social level, I feel like that's bad for development, right? Like, I don't think it, and that's just one instance. We could go a million different directions with this. But like when you're talking about physical maturity in middle school, like 8th grade to 6th grade is a big jump anyway, like you said, for puberty. But when you add on to that with the holdback year and the maybe second holdback year, depending on birthdays, dude, that gets out of hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, real quick. This is a more popular thing as of now. Listen, this has been going on in basketball and football since at least the year 2000. We are just hearing about this now because it's starting to happen in wrestling. So this is something that has definitely been happening for a while. It's just affecting our community now. And then also the parents are putting these kids, the parents are specializing early because they're chasing the scholarship. They think that wrestling now, it's starting to, but with other sports, it's been like a meal ticket. So they're chasing that 9.9 scholarship. I'm sure you're aware. I mean, there's only 9.9 scholarships.
Well, isn't there 30 now? Didn't they go up?
Next year, they're going to go to 30. So we'll cross that bridge. But my point is that the reality of the kid getting the actual scholarship, even if he's a state qualifier, even if he's a state champ, is still the odds, the percentage, why are we basing our whole entire like strategy on this one thing? It goes back to a holistic approach: mind, body, spirit, academics, athletics, activities. Like, that's just my opinion. You got to have everything covered, because wrestling can't just be the only thing. I've seen so many guys get burned where wrestling was their everything, and then they don't have wrestling and they have no other skills besides wrestling. So now we're talking about life skills. I'm talking about more guys mid-college tier. But I get what you're saying with the holdback. I think it's weird. I think it's odd. I'd say the only time where it would be caveat is when the kid is 17. Maybe he can hold them back for one, so he's 18. But maybe if the kid has an early birthday or something like that, maybe. I'm just being a devil's advocate. Outside of that, I don't really see a whole lot of benefit.
The only thing I ever said that would work for me that I would agree with, and it would be in the wrestling space, is we got a buddy that he's a senior this year. He's a holdback senior. He held back in 8th grade, but he weighed like 88 pounds, right? Like, he needed to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So like he wouldn't have been big enough to wrestle 106 as a freshman. So like I understood that, and then of course he went in his freshman year. He wrestled 106. He actually won state as a freshman. So like, I'll call it a red shirt or whatever. But if you're not big enough, I mean, I can understand that taking a year to grow, right? Like, that's cool. But like, just to hold back for some kind of advantage you think you're getting, I don't think you're getting as much as you think.
No, you're ready. I'm a big believer in like staying ready, get ready. I don't believe in delaying the inevitable. Like, one of the big, my favorite movie is Rocky. So like, he tells them, like in Rocky, there is no tomorrow. Like, there is no tomorrow, especially in this sport that's so unforgiving. I think we dress things up and we politically correct like things, and we like paint certain fantasies sometimes. Like, listen, kid, you can get an injury tomorrow. You might not be able to afford college. Something by personal might happen. You could be in and out of this sport like that. So if you have an opportunity, you have to capitalize on it. The coaches need to speak with this level of urgency that you could probably hear. You need to make them learn to comprehend this. Like, the time is now. Like, there is no next season. There is no senior year. You have to go out and win this year. You have to go out and achieve this year, not next. Yes, it's good to have a long-term plan. I'm a huge advocate of goal setting. But if I'm the sport coach in that school setting, the time is now, is what I'm trying to say. If I'm coming in with a different role as like a mentor or a performance coach, I'm trying to plan over 1, 3, 5 years. But my point is that there's never a perfect time. There is no perfect opportunity. You got to take advantage and strike while the iron's hot. In professional fighting, which I deal with a lot of MMA fighters now, helping them deal with the mental in and out of the cage, amateurs, you got to do it now. Now is the time. Injury is always on the horizon. Family, social situations. We can get into a million, but that's kind of my operating system. If that's fair, if that's something you can see, if that makes sense.
I think I love it, dude. Really, I do.
Some people, I don't know, that's how I see it. Like, you got to have momentum. You got to capitalize on momentum, and you got to take it. An athlete might not be the same in 6 months, 12 months.
No, I'll tell you this too. This is something that part of this that we didn't really touch on, but I think this is a great discussion, by the way. We're covering a lot of good key points here. I want to say this, though. There's something that we didn't cover that is kind of crucial. During puberty, right, especially for boys, all right, you change, like, not only physically, but like your habits change. You become aggressive. You become, like, you remember when you were like 15, 16 years old, and your mom told you to take out the trash and there was really no reason behind it, but you're like, I don't feel like it, or whatever you do, right? Like, you start to get like that.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah. And you're pushing back a little bit. And I think during that time, and I'm learning this as a father too, like during that time, I feel like you need to be a little bit more understanding of circumstances. Like, cause I can only say this from a teenage boy, cause I've never been a teenage girl. Granted, my pseudo daughter there has told me things, and talked to me about her stuff. So I can kind of see both sides. But like from like a teenage boy's perspective, when you put a 15, 16-year-old kid in a high school, he's hitting puberty, he's noticing girls now, like that's a distraction there. I'm learning to drive, right? Nobody talks about that. Like, I'm focusing on something, all these other things, right? So, it's one of those things where, are you there?
I'm here. I see you. There's a lot of external.
Yeah. You kind of froze up on me for a minute.
No, we're good. There's a lot of external factors. The kid might be a Tulsa national champ, but wait till he gets that driver's permit or sees his first girl in the hallway. I get where you go.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, like, you have to be able to, understand these like you said, external factors. So, just because a kid, like you said, he won Tulsa at 10 years old doesn't mean he's going to be, whatever at, 18. So that goes back to trying to have a delicate balance and thing. And, and good parenting comes to that. And I'm not saying I'm a great parent. I try to do my best, right? He's not there. My kids are still alive. They eat every day. I think I'm doing all right. But,
that's how we raise. Roof over the head, clothes. You're good, son.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah. And you were talking about driver's permit.
Yeah, nowadays parents got it tough. You got to worry about all these external factors. Everyone talks about the kids. Nobody talks about the parents. They're like, okay, let yourself in with the key. It's under the mat. Like, figure it out. Like that.
Yeah.
That's how I was raised, at least. I don't know.
Not today, man. Not today. Boston just got his learner's permit. Like,
yeah.
His birthday was the end of September, so he's had it for what, 3 weeks, maybe ish.
Yeah.
Almost a month. And dude, we went to the place, and on the way back, he's like, "Dad, let me drive." I'm like, "Dude, I don't know if I'm ready for this." And we stopped at this bank, and we swapped seats, and we're driving down the road, and every so often he's kind of drifting off to the right, like to the ditch, and it's been a process. But then you look at that, and that's just one aspect of like things that teenagers are like learning and doing. So, that should be something that should be mentioned in along with that, that there's all these factors that you got to cover while, trying to keep them on a good path, while, keeping them on a schedule, all these types of things. So I just wanted to throw that out there from like a parental type, kind of thing. But dude, so you got coursework, right? You're like working on coursework.
What do you mean by
Are
coursework?
you putting out like, are you putting out like courses? I know you're putting out like a lot of content, but are you putting out like breakdown courses? Like I seen something you posted today and I wasn't sure what it was.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I release a lot of free materials on Instagram through socials. I have a lot of different programs, how to pull your weight management, how to deal with lack of aggression. I mean, strength and conditioning stuff. My Google Drive is filled with like so many different programs. And so if coaches reach out to me, which they do constantly, or athletes, typically I provide them with what they need. I give them the resources I have. I don't believe in, like, as the kids would say, gatekeeping. I use Instagram as like an education feed. So I'm just trying to put out information to help people because there's no value in me keeping it to myself, right?
No.
Because even if it helps one athlete or two kids, like, it's going to be huge. And a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, I still don't really see us too much focusing on in the wrestling space. So it goes back to that mind, body, spirit, Coach Coco wrestling philosophy, honesty, integrity, loyalty. And I think that's a lot of the stuff we're talking about, because whether that kid's a national champ or a JV guy, it's going to be the faith, morals, values, and that make the kid who he is. That will help him in the driving situation, in the party. You really got to help them have a decision-making process, and help them understand how to deal with peer pressure. A lot of things we cover in health class, just that type of stuff. Again, is the kid going to be perfect? No. Are we going to be perfect as coaches, teachers, parents? No. But we're learning, and you help at least give them the foundation, strong foundation. But to go back to that point, but yeah, getting a lot of stuff out there. I also have my own clients and my own athletes. I work with a ton, not just with the mental performance side, but strength and conditioning, nutrition, film evaluation. So I actually work with a wrestler or a team on a one-to-one or a group capacity, online or in person. So I'm doing a lot in the wrestling space here locally in like the New York City area, but also the beauty of us having this conversation, right? Over the phone, over, video chat, things like that. So I'm doing a lot, but I just believe in giving people value. Like, there's no sense in like me keeping this information. That's how I started, really, just putting stuff out on the story.
Dude, that's a great thing because, like I've said it a few times now and I'll repeat it probably another 900, depending on how many episodes we go. But the basis of Bmoney Beastin was to give back to underprivileged kids. That's where it started. And, to date, we've provided shoes in 39 states and now another country.
I love it.
Because we sent 250 pair of version 2s to Wrestle for Hope, I think's what it is. She follows. I tag her and stuff sometimes on Instagram. Really sweet girl. She's out in Kansas and she sends things to South America for like wrestling programs. And I thought that was a really cool thing. So I boxed up a box of shoes and sent them down. And so.
Let me know off the air line. Let me know how to work that. Send me the link. I'll put it up.
Absolutely. I'll send it over to you. Yeah, man. It's one of those things where if there's enough of us, right? Like at the end of the day, unless you're Jordan Burroughs or, the one of the one, Spencer Lee, whatever, it's what you take away from this is what matters. We want to build a generation of people and the generation after that and the generation after that has discipline and work ethic and, all these things that everybody, kind of hopes to have. And, like things that you're doing. And like, for me, I'm going to give myself a shout out. I don't do it often. Matt Clash, dude. Like maybe a 5-year-old kid sees that game and sees one of our characters and says, dude, that's really cool. I want to try that. Next thing you know, he's, you fast forward 11, 12 years and he's in college, wrestling in college. That would be awesome, right? So like, getting a degree in something that he would have never done prior. So like, if there's enough of us that get together and keep pushing this narrative of giving back and making a difference, I think that overall we're going to build a new generation of kids that's going to do a lot of great things. And I think that's the goal here.
Definitely. It goes back to that operating system. I call it that philosophy of being champions on the mat and in life. So we're trying to provide them life skills, honesty, integrity, discipline, all the things that we know you got from football, I got from wrestling. That's really why I'm doing this, because I know how it can change the trajectory of your life, which it definitely changed mine, right? Personally. I'll get into that in a minute. I just wanted to shout out, there's 2 fundraisers that I did, and it's in from no way like a virtue signal standpoint, because that's definitely not who I am or what I stand for. But there
Okay.
was a program out in Jersey, NCAA wrestling. And then my buddy Nick, he has a nonprofit for under privileged kids out there. And, you know, I know both of these coaches very well. I've helped them get kids into college with recruiting. So I know they're legit. I know they're good guys. And so I was able to donate gratefully, thankfully, to their cause. A lot, but it was something. So I'm always trying to give back to the wrestling community any way I can, because there's
If you can get that to me, or I'll be sure to put posts about it and stuff. Like anything like that helps kids, I'm all for it, dude. Like underprivileged kids. That's an awesome thing, man. Like, and I would love, if I was a billionaire, I would start building wrestling clubs in every city, and I'd even like work with. I know this is going to sound insane, but I'd work with people, like I'd get with Walmart, I'd get with other nonprofits. We'd build apartments for single moms, and like that's who I am. I just haven't never become rich enough to do that. But that's like who we are, So if we can help with that, man, send that over. I'll see if I can help out.
Definitely, I will, and I've posted about it on the socials. Just try to to share it out, like even the GoFundMe's or the fundraisers, just to get the word out. Because sharing it, someone else might be able to see it. So yeah, if anyone's interested, I can get them connected. I'll send that over to you. I think a big thing though, like people don't realize is, especially like boys statistically, academically, are struggling now, and the environment is not suited for them. And a sport like wrestling, especially a kid who has the ADD, ADHD symptoms, an individual sport like wrestling could get them on the trajectory there needs to be. And there's research on this. We could plug it in if we want. Simple Google search, so people are like, know what I'm talking about. But I mean, you have a lot of the elementary teachers, right, are not male. A lot of kids are in single parent homes. Divorce rate is super high. I mean, there's a lot of societal things going on right now where the wrestling coach or the football coach might only be the only male influence in that child's life. And yes, we respect and love women and appreciate it, but there also needs to be a place where men are mentored by other men so they can learn to be productive, healthy citizens. And that's really what we're trying to do when we're talking about building these programs and building wrestling programs and helping kids out, because they need those positive role models, positive mentors, positive influences. And without those, you're going to have, challenges. Every teenager is going to have challenges. Every kid's going to have challenges, but it's definitely going to expedite it. In my experience, growing up here, being around, like that's the reality, right?
Man, the single parent thing has always been like, I'm 36, and I remember, I come from, my mom and dad were divorced, right? Like before, I don't even remember them being married, like at all. So like, there were so many kids I went to school with that didn't. I remember elementary school, like, I remember a kid asked me one time, like, what my dad did. And like, my dad, we didn't have a great relationship till I was older. And my dad, like, I had no idea what he did. And at some point, like, it was like a year passed. I was like maybe 5 or 6, 8. I don't know. I was really young though. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know. And I told the kid, I was like, I just don't know. And, I can, as just me personally, I can look back on how, the father not having always your father, you tend to, like my high school football coach in high school, like that guy, we didn't always see eye to eye, but he always had my best interest and he was always there for me. Like my mom was a single parent. He picked me up for workouts over the summer before my sophomore year, before I got my license. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, he'd buy me breakfast. Like he'd take me home. We'd talk. And when he ended up getting fired after my senior year, like it was a political principle kind of thing. It was kind of stupid, really. But he, I remember going to his house and we walked around his neighborhood for like an hour just talking about life. I went and seen him about 3 or 4 years ago. He's a principal now at another high school. He's done really well.
That's awesome.
that was like my mentor, right? Like for my life. And I know that, every kid's got, and I'm sure you have a couple through your life. There's always somebody that's willing to say, hey, look, you're cared about. We're going to help you, and I think that there's this misconception, especially in wrestling, right? And like in this sport that we talk about. And the Bmoney Beastin podcast is technically a wrestling podcast, but dude, we can talk about anything. We can talk about baseball. We're very open here. I like it being that way. So like when you mentioned that earlier, I just want to throw that out there. I would interview anybody. I don't care what they do. I'd talk to them and we talk about the same probably the same issues and things. But like, I think that we all have like these people that come into our life that say, hey, this is, you're important. We care about you. And I think there's this misconception, especially like going back to wrestling, that, it's a very much how it's looked at is what have you done for me lately? That's really how it is, right? Like there's so much pressure. Like, well, that kid won state last year. What if he don't win it this year? Right? Like and it's almost like kids think that their value as a human being like just goes away without it. And I want to preach that right now. You are, whoever it is, you're important. It doesn't matter if you're the best or the worst. You're important and you have value. And I just wanted to throw that out there.
I could totally relate to your story. I know where you're coming from. Like myself, was my brother and I, we grew up in a single parent household. So we really looked out for each other. And that's where I think the drive and the initial hunger came from, to do more, to be more, because when you're in that type of situation, you really don't have an option. You don't have B. You don't have a plan B. Your plan
Right.
plan A. So you got to make it for yourself, and you got to be hungry, and you got to push yourself academically, athletically, socially. And with that comes ups and downs. I'm sure you had learning curves, but just like you, just like that football coach, I was blessed to have great coaches in my life at the high school level and the club level who really showed me the way. Kind of the guys I was saying earlier with the matches, multiple matches a year, it's being on top of me. But at the end of the day, every kid's an individual, every kid's different, but sometimes they just need to be like, hey, I know you don't want to do this right now, and I know you don't like this, but you have to. And when you become an adult, sometimes you're going to have to do things you don't want to do. And as a teacher and as a coach, I've had to definitely tell kids that. And even with clients, like sometimes you got to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And there's a way of doing it, right, where it doesn't cross that boundary but you have to let them know humans deserve the truth. We all have free will. And your job as a coach or a leader is to tell them the truth. Your delivery you could change, but to be open and honest with the people you care about, with your family. They deserve it, even if that truth is going to hurt temporarily. And that, I think, when you think like that, it's easier to deliver painful news. Like, hey, you're weight cutting terribly. Like, you need to change this. That's not disrespectful. It's the reality. Do you keep getting the same results, or do you want to do things like the right way now?
And sometimes, like I'm glad you said that. I'm gonna, we've been going 54 minutes. This has been a really good episode, man.
Thank you.
I'll wrap it up with this back off of what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Being honest with people is key, right? Like nobody's going to come up to me and say, hey man, you can win the Boston Marathon. Because I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to win the Boston Marathon, right? So
don't worry.
Yeah, that ain't happening. And so, it's one of those things where that's a great thing. And then I also feel like, and for me recently as a parent, I'm learning that, okay, this is how you see things. Okay. I'm going to let you do that for a while and see how things go for you. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm sitting at. And I think that I can tell you till I'm blue in the face that this is what you should do. But ultimately, you're a young adult. You're becoming an adult. So at that point in time, whatever your choices are, whatever the consequences of those choices are ultimately on you, right? And whenever you come back in a month or a week or 6 months and you say, hey, dude, I screwed up, I'll be like, yeah, okay, man, you screwed up. I love you. Dude, we're going to move forward, and this is how you need to do it. We're going to do this, 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 this. So I think I agree with that. Tell them the truth. They're not always going to listen to you. When they do listen to you, and it may be months later or a year later, I think eventually everybody comes back around, right? Because some people are so stubborn, they'll beat their head against the wall trying to prove that their way is better than yours. And eventually, if it isn't, it circles back around. So that's my new that's my parenting tip for this episode. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I've seen it a ton of times. So hopefully the kid comes back around, but maybe he tells you after he graduates or he's done wrestling, like, damn, I really should have listened to you in that instance. I really thought about what you said, but when they do come around, yes, you have to let people make their own mistakes. I think as the coaches out there, maybe, and the parent, like, you have to give choice. You have to provide choices, but the choice is one that has the same favorable outcome. For example, all right, we're gonna drill switches or stand-ups. I don't know. Both get the result we want. Creating space, moving on bottom. You just throw in little choice. Hey, you want to do the long distance running or sprints today, kids? Either way, you're getting the conditioning. You're giving them the illusion of control, which is going to increase buy-in. This is a pro tip for the listeners. Things like that. I could give a million examples. The last thing I want to say is what you were talking about, and it relates to what I put out today, is like focusing on the process. You know, like I have these themes that I constantly reiterate to my clients and my athletes, like, until I'm blue in the face, because eventually it clicks. Eventually they hear it enough times, it's repetition. So that's one of the things I was talking about with goal setting, is just having them worry about the dailies, the process, the little things, so they don't get overwhelmed with all the big stuff, the national titles, the state titles, the Division I scholarships. I'm all for those things. I want people to shoot for the moon, and so they land on a cloud. I want my guys to win and be successful. But, you know, if we put too much emphasis on the outcome, I know we're not going to get there, because I know it held me back, and it's held back athletes I've coached in the past. So now we want to spend the majority of our time on our performance goals and our process goals.
And that's 100%, man. Like, you know, it's the end game. It'll almost paralyze some kids, right? Like, they're worried so much about, I gotta win this match, instead of like, I've been the happiest over the years watching matches like where he may not win, but he wrestles his ass off, and you're like, dude, okay, that's awesome, bro. Like, I don't care that you lost. You just fought hard, you know. Like, when you go out and you get, nobody can ask. We'll end with this statement: nobody can ask more of you than your best. And if you give your best, hell yeah, right? That's it. Bro, this was an awesome conversation. I've been looking forward to it. I hate we missed the last one, because you were supposed to be like episode 9 or something. But dude, well, we circle back around, man. Before we go, tell everybody out there how to follow you on Instagram and all those types of things.
Yeah, guys, the best way to get in touch with me is probably through Instagram at coach_Coco_. Send me a DM, comment on my post. I'll get in touch with you. Just shoot me a message. Outside of that, obviously, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. Just look up Coach Coco Wrestling. Coach Coco Wrestling. That's how you'll find me. And if you or somebody you know is struggling, trying to overcome mental blocks or performance hurdles, give me a shout. I got a lot of stuff out there for you to help you guys overcome those challenges.
That's awesome, man. Episode 20, where are we at? 24. 24 of the Bmoney Beastin podcast is in the books.